أنا صامد رغم الجراح رغم الأعادي والسلاح وأظل أرفع رايتي وأنادي حي على الكفاح. أنا صامد رغم الجراح.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله.
فتكبروا في ليلكم واستبشروا، لا تيأسوا لا تركنوا، فالفجر آن له البواب. يا أهل غزة تكبروا في ليلكم واستبشروا.
We all know the brutality that the Palestinian people have been faced with, the killing that has been going on in their ranks, the rounding up of refugee camps, the invasion and occupation of whole cities, the abuse of human rights not only to the Palestinian people, but add to that journalists were shot at, and all of this is happening with a very fast pace. The first thing that we need to recognize and realize is that we need to look into the extreme suffering that the Palestinian people are going through in their fight for freedom and liberation, the suffering that they are going through, the extreme hardships that they are living in, and one needs to recognize the legendary patience and perseverance that these people are showing. The response of our Muslim brothers and sisters in Palestine is truly legendary. For people to go through this for 50 years of humiliation, of oppression, repression, of all different and innovative forms of abuse, nevertheless they are still patient, they are still holding ground, and they are refusing to leave their homeland, and they are continuing in their resistance. This is something that is a miracle, and it needs to be recognized, and we need to make dua for them. Add to that, they are fighting for a legitimate cause, and the whole world is trying to cover that up and accuse the one who is victim of being the aggressor. And that is an added psychological insult to them. When people are fighting, as we have seen in the past, they usually get some moral support from the outside world, from people who sympathize for their cause. However, in this case, the Palestinian people have been receiving very little. Why? Because the ones who should be on their side are putting them down. And that is the Muslim Ummah. But it needs to be said that what they are doing will be rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not by us. There is a trend that is noticeable now to present the issue as if it is an issue of the Palestinian people alone and the Israeli people alone, as if it has no connections to Islam, Judaism, or Christianity. As if it is a war over land, as if it is a nationalistic fight, and that is very dangerous. But we find that there are people on both sides, on the Palestinian or Arab side, and also on the Jewish or Christian side, who are attempting to present it in this way. Now, it's obvious why the Israelis would want to present this as a Palestinian-only issue, because they do not want to instigate the whole Islamic nation into this affair. And the same also holds true for many of the Western powers. They do not want to be perceived as enemies of Islam. But then on the other side, on the Palestinian side, and also on the Arab side, and many of the Muslims too, are trying to present this as if it is only a human rights issue. It's an issue of a people that have been stripped away from their land and their rights have been abused. And the reason why they are doing this is because they do not want to alienate the Jews and Christians or other religious groups who are sympathetic for the cause. Because remember that there are many Jews who are against Zionism, and there are many Jews who are against what the state of Israel is doing. And there are many Christians who have the same feeling. So we have some of our Islamic leaders are presenting this as a human rights issue. They don't want to present any religious tie to what's happening in order not to alienate the others. But what is happening in the process is that this is alienating the most important audience, and that is the Muslim Ummah. This is not an issue of Palestinians alone, and it's not an Arab issue. At the root of all what is happening is religion, on both sides. Palestine and Jerusalem is holy to us because Allah says so in the Quran. And it is important to us because Rasulullah ﷺ said so. And the same can be said about the Jews too. I mean, an American Jew or a European Jew, what would make them so attached to that land except that they are citing passages from the Bible for that? And just a few days ago we had a US Senator saying that our support of Israel is our duty, our religious duty, because we are doing God's work. And that is how it is viewed. So religion has a lot to do with what is happening, and it cannot be separated from this affair. And this is a promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to this ummah, and religion cannot be separated. Now I'm saying this because many times we see these statements coming out that are very secular, and Islam is nowhere in there. This is an Islamic cause. It is not an Arab nationalistic cause, and it is not the cause of the Palestinian people. This is an Islamic issue, and it needs to be dear and important to every Muslim around the world. And for those who are attempting not to alienate others, so that one day they would get the support of the White House or the United Nations, we need to realize that this issue will not be solved by the United States, it will not be solved by the UN, it will not be solved by John Sixpack or Sally Soccer Mom. This is an issue that will only be solved by the Muslim Ummah. This is an Islamic issue, and we need to wake up to the reality of what is happening there. And it needs to be an interest of every Muslim. And I'm saying this because many times we see that there are some Muslims that don't feel connected to what is happening there. Remember that Jerusalem is the land of my prophets and your prophets. This is the land of Musa. It's the land of Isa. It's the land where Ibrahim alayhi salam, even though he's not from Palestine, but that is where he chose to settle. And that is where Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam went to lead all of the Anbiya in Salah, to symbolize that he is now the leader and the inheritor of the true message. In Rihlat al-Isra wal-Mi'raj, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam led a Salah in which all of the Anbiya were praying behind him. He led them in a 2-rak'ah Salah. The relationship between Muslims and Jews goes back 1400 years ago. It's not a new relationship. The way the Muslims approach this relationship is with open heart, tolerance, and a spirit of cooperation. When Rasulullah ﷺ went to Medina, he had agreements with the Jewish tribes who were settling in Medina. It's very clear from these agreements that Rasulullah ﷺ was treating the Jewish tribes of Medina as partners and equal citizens of the Islamic State. And one can go through this agreement. Throughout history, the Muslims continued with this spirit of relationship with al-Yahud because we consider them to be people of the book. Whenever Islam entered into a country or a nation where Yahud were living, Islam welcomed them and gave them their rights. Not only that, but Jews from other nations, when they were persecuted by Christians or others, they chose to settle in the Muslim world because they knew that the Muslims are welcoming and generous. But unfortunately, it has been a relationship from one side. This generosity and this welcoming and this tolerance that came from the side of the Muslims was met by sabotage, by wickedness. They plotted to kill Rasulullah ﷺ more than once, and every time Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would expose their plans. The one who tried to mobilize the Arabian tribes into fighting Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and the one who was the dynamo and the mover of the coalition of Al-Ahzab was a Yahudi. And then the one who caused the greatest fitna among the Ummah after the death of Uthman, who carried the rumors and caused all of the wars and fitan that came after that, was Abdullah ibn Saba, a Yahudi. The one who was instrumental in bringing down Al-Khilafah Al-Uthmaniyah was a Yahudi, and turning it into a secular state, Turkey, and stripping it of its magnificence, where it was the ruling and the superpower of the Muslim world. And if you look today in America, which is a predominantly Christian nation, and you see who are the ones who are leading the onslaught against the Muslims in this country, you could go through the names and look at their origins. Stephen Emerson, Daniel Pipes, Bernard Lewis, and the list goes on and on. The tolerance that we have been treating the people of the book, Al-Yahud, this is the reciprocal relationship that we get from them. And now we are seeing how they are treating us in Palestine. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قَدْ بَدَتِ الْبَغْضَاءُ مِنْ أَفْوَاهِهِمْ وَمَا تُخْفِي صُدُورُهُمْ أَعْظَمُ. This is the hatred that comes out of their mouths, and what they conceal in their hearts is greater. And now we hear about all of the hate that the Muslims are teaching. SubhanAllah, who is teaching hate? And who's hating who? When the Yahudi, the Israeli soldiers in 89, and this has been reported in the Jerusalem Post and the Independent, they have went into a Muslim school in Palestine. They have taken all of the copies of Quran, they have taken them with them to the restrooms, used them as toilet paper in the school, in front of the Muslims, and then they decorated the whole school with pages of the Quran. This is the hatred. Can we ever cite in the history of the Muslims any Muslim who treated the Bible in this way? Can there be any Muslim who would speak against Musa, one of the Anbiya, in this horrible way? And look at the rumors that they're coming up with about the Quran and about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, pure hate. And I read to you before the National Geographic photographer when he went into the Masjid al-Aqsa, and he saw that there was an Israeli commander commanding his soldiers to shoot at children and to shoot at youth in the masjid. And then he saw a young Israeli soldier, a woman, she was arguing with the commander, and then she just collapsed and cried. He thought that she's crying because the commander is telling her to shoot at kids. He went to investigate the matter, and he found out that this Israeli soldier, woman, female, she was arguing with the commander. She wanted to get permission from him to shoot a child that was standing in front of her, and when he refused, she argued with him, and when he insisted on his refusal, she sat down and cried. This is hate. The Muslims are extending the hand. As a Muslim, we cannot be anti-Semitism. We cannot be anti-Semitism. We're not allowed to discriminate against anyone. As Muslims, we cannot have arrogance against anyone. As Muslims, we cannot treat anyone with brutality. But these are our standards, and we would hope that others would deal with us with these same standards. What is happening in Palestine will expose many of the lies that are going on around us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ لِمَ تَلْبِسُونَ الْحَقَّ بِالْبَاطِلِ وَتَكْتُمُونَ الْحَقَّ وَأَنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. O people of the book, why do you mix truth with falsehood? And you cover up the truth, and you know the truth. The truth will come out, and it will prevail in the end. Dear brothers and sisters, we want you to support this cause as much as you can. This is your cause, and it will determine the fate of the world. This is the Holy Land, and Allah's eye is watching it. It's not like any other dispute or any other conflict. It is very important. The American public has been brainwashed when it comes to Islam. It has been poisoned. The media, which is controlled by pro-Israeli elements, is filtering out anything that is pro-Islamic or pro-Palestinian. It's all filtered out. And by the way, if you heard the tapes, the Nixon tapes in '72, a conversation between the well-known and famous Christian evangelist Billy Graham and President Nixon. Billy Graham was complaining to the president and telling him that the Jews have a stranglehold over the media. The president told him, do you think so? He said, yes, I do. The president said, and I agree, but I cannot say so. Not only do they control the media, but the president says, I cannot do anything about it. And the tapes came out. What was the response of Billy Graham? Obviously, he apologized. And they are poisoning the public. And again, Al-Yahud are carrying the burden of that. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us to the truth. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give support to our brothers in Palestine, the ones who are on the forefront, and the ones who will lead the Ummah on this. It is expected from the brothers and sisters in Palestine that they would lead the Ummah in this. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is putting them through this for a purpose. They are going through this for a purpose. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is preparing them. This hardship is eventually going to make them purified and closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give them victory. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give the Muslim minorities in India and in Kashmir and in Chechnya, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give them His blessing and His support. Also, don't forget what is going on in India, even though it's on the back burner in terms of the news. You need to follow up on what is happening there.
صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا.